Greetings. Welcome to my channel. My name is Bulali. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you even more if you are back here having seen my previous video. Today's the 17th of April. I am still at home. Today's the first day the lockdown should have ended, but as we know, it was extended to the end of April. So I decided to make this video to speak about rights, our rights as South Africans, and how they've been affected by the lockdown. South Africa is governed by the Constitution, and in the Constitution, Chapter 1 is the founding provisions. That's Chapter 1, Sections 1 to 6. So in those sections, you will have more the fundamentals of what South Africa is as a country. Things like the Constitution, constitutional supremacy, the fact that South Africa is a democracy based on human rights, then a few other things like the national anthem, the national flag. Those kinds of things are in the founding provisions of the Constitution. What's more relevant to this video is Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is Sections 7 to 39, which is the Bill of Rights. In the Bill of Rights, your rights as a South African are contained. So what are those rights? Well, very important to now, your right to freedom of movement, your right to practice a religion, your right not to be discriminated against. Those rights are all contained in the Bill of Rights. So under lockdown, those rights are quite severely curtailed. You don't even have the right just to move around. You don't have freedom of association. You can't go and meet your friends and have a nice dope. So how has that happened? I made this video after seeing a letter written by the Gauteng Liquor Association. I think a group of liquor retailers in Gauteng had written to the president to say, President, please lift the ban on alcohol sales. In their letter, they rely on Section 22 of the Constitution, which is part of the Bill of Rights, and it contains the right to practice a trade. So your right to practice a trade is in the Constitution, and you ought, under all normal circumstances, be able to open a business anywhere where you can afford the rent or whatever the situation is, and carry on a trade. So they've written to the president to say that right specifically has been infringed upon. Now, on face value, it has been infringed upon, but you need to look at the Bill of Rights in its entirety. And towards the end of the Bill of Rights, Section 36 contains a limitation clause. Now, what that clause states is that the rights in the Bill of Rights can be limited. The limitation ought to be reasonable. It ought to be the minimal limitation that is necessary for the greater good in most instances. So the rights that have been limited, the Section 22 rights to practice a trade that have been limited, the limitation is valid in terms of Section 36, because of course the rights are limited to protect the whole country from a pandemic. So let's talk about limitation of rights. This is definitely not the first time your rights have been limited in terms of Section 36. Take, for instance, the right to freedom. Right to freedom is in the Constitution, but let's say you are arrested. When you're arrested, you can't get arrested, go to court and say, look, let me free because I have the right to freedom in terms of the Constitution. That right is being limited with a reason. If you're a danger to society, you're a criminal, then your right to freedom is limited, and that limitation is justified in terms of Section 36 of the Constitution. So let's speak of other instances. Lots of rights can be limited. Your right to property, even your property rights, in terms of Section 25, can be limited. I know Section 25 sparks land debates and land reform debates, but that's not what this video is about. I'll give you a more simple and actually more common limitation in terms of Section 25, rights being limited. The state can expropriate property. So you have a right to your property, but the state can expropriate it if it's necessary for something else. Leaving land reform aside, let's talk about roads, like the Department of Roads and Transport. They actually probably do the most expropriating of property in the country. I'm just thinking that because if, for instance, Sanral wants to extend the N2 and they decide that, look, the best place for the N2 based on geographical studies and engineering studies, they decide that the best place where the N2 should run is right through your front door. You will get a letter where they will say, excuse me, we need this property because we want to build the N2 here. The N2 serves millions of people, adds to economic efficiency, all sorts. Of course, the N2 is very important. So you will say, wait a minute, this is my front door. I'm living here, I'm watching generations with my family. What's happening? And they will say, look, okay, we will expropriate your property, meaning the state will pay you for your house, or they will just buy you another house and relocate you. This is done quite often. I know for a fact the Kucha, if you're familiar with Port Elizabeth and Kucha, I know for a fact the Kucha IDZ, one of the things that was expropriated there was an abalone farm that was on the coast there, and it was where they needed to build Kucha IDZ. And they expropriated that farm and they paid that man out. And in the abalone industry, there's actually a long-running joke that he's the only person to ever make money out of abalone. So back to rights. You're right. Our right to freedom is limited, and that limitation is valid under Section 36. A further right that is limited is the right to certain trades. Specifically, the alcohol guys challenged it. But everyone who at the moment cannot sell what they usually sell, their Section 22 right to practice a trade has been limited in terms of Section 36. And that limitation is valid. Should someone go to court, that's what the president is going to plead in court, that, look, we've limited these rights for the greater good, which is obviously to protect us all from this COVID-19 pandemic. So, yeah, I mean, I've got my eye on the news. I've got a lot of time. I'm paying attention to a lot of things. Maybe you might miss me in my normal life. But yeah, the state, I don't think, I mean, obviously, if you want to go into nitty-gritties, you could find certain irregularities. As far as I know, the regulations were published very late. I think only published yesterday, extending the lockdown. So yeah, if you want to be difficult, you could argue notice periods and reasonability of the actions. But generally, our rights are limited. They're limited for a good reason. They're limited in terms of the Constitution, and we're just going to have to live with it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye.